The notion that global warming is a war by the mainstream media against Christianity is a complex and multifaceted concept that has been debated by scholars, theologians, and scientists. While there is no conclusive evidence to support this claim, it is essential to examine the underlying arguments and ideologies that fuel this notion. To begin with, some argue that the mainstream media's emphasis on environmentalism and climate change is a veiled attempt to undermine Christian values and principles. They contend that the media's focus on human-induced climate change shifts the attention away from God's sovereignty over the natural world, implying that humans, rather than God, are responsible for the Earth's fate. This perceived shift in focus is seen as a threat to the traditional Christian worldview, which emphasizes humanity's stewardship over the Earth, as ordained by God. Furthermore, critics argue that the mainstream media's portrayal of climate change as a predominantly human-caused phenomenon is a deliberate attempt to discredit Christian teachings on the role of sin and redemption. By attributing the Earth's problems to human activities such as carbon emissions and deforestation, the media is seen as promoting a secular, human-centered narrative that neglects the spiritual dimensions of environmental degradation. This, in turn, is perceived as an attack on Christian theology, which emphasizes the role of sin and humanity's fall from grace as the primary causes of the world's problems. Another argument put forth by proponents of this notion is that the mainstream media's climate change agenda is closely tied to a broader, anti-Christian ideology that seeks to erode traditional values and promote a secular, liberal worldview. They point to the media's frequent criticism of Christian leaders and organizations that express skepticism about climate change, as well as its tendency to amplify the voices of secular environmentalists and scientists who often advance a distinctly non-Christian, or even anti-Christian, agenda. However, it is essential to note that this narrative is not universally accepted and is, in fact, contested by many Christian leaders, theologians, and scientists who argue that environmental stewardship and care for the earth are deeply rooted in Christian teachings. They point to biblical passages, such as Psalm 24:1, which states that the earth is the Lord's, and everything in it, and Genesis 2:15, which commands humans to take care of and protect the earth, as evidence of the Christian imperative to care for the environment. Moreover, many Christians are actively engaged in environmental activism and advocacy, recognizing that climate change poses a significant threat to the world's most vulnerable populations, including the poor, the elderly, and future generations. They argue that the Christian response to climate change must be rooted in a deep sense of compassion, justice, and stewardship, and that the mainstream media's attention to this issue can, in fact, serve as a catalyst for Christian action and engagement. In conclusion, while the idea that global warming is a war by the mainstream media against Christianity is a complex and contested notion, it is clear that the debate surrounding climate change is often deeply intertwined with broader cultural, theological, and ideological tensions. Rather than accept a simplistic narrative that pits Christianity against environmentalism, it is essential to engage in a nuanced and respectful dialogue that acknowledges the diversity of Christian perspectives on this issue and seeks to promote a deeper understanding of the complex relationships between faith, science, and the natural world. By doing so, we can work towards a more informed, compassionate, and effective response to the challenges posed by climate change, one that is grounded in a deep sense of Christian values and principles.